Good evening and welcome to the Velocity of Now with me, your host Thomas Sheridan. We're on the Reality Bytes radio network. That's Reality Bytes, Bytes with a B-Y, radio.com, and with Paula at the Neil at the controls, and broadcasting worldwide on several stations, well, many stations now, and also you can pick me up on archives of the show on my YouTube channel, which is Thomas Sheridan Arts on YouTube. And all the previous shows, even the ones back on the good old Type 1 network, well, it's still going strong and doing better than ever Type 1, but still on the old Type 1 shows are all there as well. You can find them. My regular website is thomassheridanarts.com. If you'd like to help me out, you could always buy a book there. I've got a couple of books there you might find interesting. And if you can't afford to even do that, just sharing my videos and sharing my articles helps me out and gets my work out there. Now, I'm on my phone tonight because you're listening to the show broadcast on my Android, and I hope you can hear it okay. I hope the quality is good out there. If not, I'm recording it with my good audio recorder, so I'll get a good quality broadcast up on Thomas Sheridan Arts on YouTube. But my computer was hacked into about 2 hours ago, and I can't get on. I just can't get into it. So we'll have to see what went on there, what happened there. But these things happen, so the show must go on, as they say. Now, tonight's show will be a continuation of this theme, this journey that I've been wanting to go on for so long, but so many other things got in the way of it on my other work that I'm finally now free to explore this. Well, it's not even a tangent. For me, it's an absolute passion. And if at times it does sound like I'm overly romantic about exploring my heathen, pagan, Gaelic, Norse, on all the European heritage and our indigenous ancestry in Europe, if I seem very romanticized about that, well, I make no apology for that, because I find it very beautiful and very liberating, and I've always found it very romantic. And I think when approached in the manner which I am trying to bring it forward, other people also find it romantic, and they likewise are having this sense of liberation. Now, I'm approaching it very differently. We're going to talk about this later on, but some people out there see this whole journey as somehow Irish and Celtic mythology, as well as all indigenous European mythology, is a product of the Middle East. Well, I believe it's all the other way around. And I think much of this desire to connect Ireland with the Middle East constantly is nothing more than rehashed 19th century Victorian British Israelite stuff that was created basically to validate and justify the creation of a Zionist state in the Middle East, which I'm not against in any way. I have no problem with that idea. I know some people do, but the reality is that the Jews were in the Middle East thousands of years ago, regardless of some of the interesting and strange origins of many Jewish groups that call themselves Jewish today. The simple fact is there was a Jewish, a Hebrew homeland in the Middle East. But the British Israelite movement was created to give everybody on these islands, England, Ireland, Scotland, Wales, a sense of, shall we say, conditional servitude to the idea of legitimizing the Bible in terms of foreign policy and religious doctrine. We'll talk a little bit about that tonight. I'm not going to get too deep into it. But tonight we'll be continuing on from the previous show on this topic, and we'll be talking about this Celtic, Gaelic, whatever you want to call it, coupled with some other, mythologies thrown in there, which I want you to explore, because it's important for us to get back to this. This week in Ireland we had quite a remarkable thing happened. The majority of Irish people voted hugely in favour of allowing gay marriages. All the Christians are up in arms. The Vatican even said that it was a defeat for humanity. No, it was a defeat for monotheism and the Abrahamic religions. As I've spoken about in previous shows, the Norse people believed that gay men, the Seath, had tremendous magical powers because they embodied both races. If you read the descriptions of the ancient Irish warriors and all the Celtic warriors, not only the ones in Ireland and Britain, but also the ones in Gaul and all around Europe who were documented by either the Romans or the Greeks, the men were a bunch of queens. They were as hard as nails. I mean, queens, I mean, they were like drag queens. They were the original metrosexuals in the sense that they absolutely did themselves up to the nines. They loved blinging themselves up with gold, wearing their trousers, wearing their kilts, having these blinged up swords, and they were as hard as nails. It didn't distract from the fact that they were strong and manly. They were actually like, you know, and all the stories talk about this, like Cuchulainn and his beauty, and all the stories of the Roman archival stories of the Gaels talk about them all preening themselves up like a bunch of queens before battle. And this amazed the Romans because they wanted to look really good going into a fight. What we would consider to be kind of drag queeny or gay today, guys wielding swords back then, 2,000-3,000 years ago, were like that. So, you know, this is you see, when what the Abrahamic religions did was darken the colour of our souls. That's what it really did. That's why you have burqas and nuns in black and separation of men and women in Orthodox synagogues and Jewish men in Orthodox Jewish communities all dressed in black. It robbed the colour from our souls and the song from our hearts. And I'll tell you how. And it's all over the world. If you look at the traditional costumes of Afghanistan, for say, they were gloriously beautiful costumes of national tribal clothes. They weren't burqas. They weren't a guy dressed in white with a hat on his head. It wasn't anything like that. The Abrahamic religions, because they robbed the magic from our souls, that was reflected in the clothing. There was no beauty in that. And that's one of the reasons why, you know, I find it interesting that the Catholic Church bling themselves up into oblivion with everything they do, but they tell everyone else to be frugal. Just like they rape children constantly, but then call Irish people, allowing gay people to get married, a defeat for humanity. This is what the Abrahamic thing does. Now, today is Frigablot, the festival of Friga, and speaking of poetic, Carrie Lee Miller wrote from Lifting the Veil. She wrote, and recipeforanarchy.com, she wrote a beautiful, I guess, soliloquy to her relationship with the goddess Frigga, and how she'd finally found a goddess she could be compatible with, not in servitude to. And again, as you've heard all my work in the past, the reason why these archetypes are so much more important to us as Europeans is that they validate our European sense of social justice and fairness, in that they don't have an absolute one ruling God who tells us this, that and the other, and we all have to obey it. The archetypes and gods and goddesses are, shall we say, a psychoanalysis of a sort, a kind of a counselling, a crutch, something we can draw upon outside ourselves to aid us through the different stages of our own personal monomyth and mythology. So this is on, you know, depending on part of the world you're on, this broadcast is going out on Odin's Day, Wednesday, or Thursday, depending where you are. It's already Thursdays here, but it's just all it just all works out so beautifully. So if it sounds like I'm poetic and overly romantic about it, well, that's tough shit, because I love being this way about it, because that's how it makes me feel. I just, even thinking about tonight's show, I get excited. I get excited when I want to talk about these topics. I'd love to go out and be able to do more speeches and talks on these, but unfortunately, a leader from a notorious flying saucer comet death cult has told her fanatics to bury me, and so I have to be very careful where I go these days. But fortunately, I have the radio show and my website and everything else, so I can reach people in other ways. Now, talking of cults and fanaticism and mind games, there's a thing called the Charlie Challenge at the moment. And what this is basically a game using a Ouija board that kids are doing. And, of course, see, in the same way cult members don't know they're suckers in order to enable the millionaire lifestyles of the cult in the inner cult family in the compound, the leaders of the Christian churches also do not understand that they are suckers for the dark side, which in their case is Jehovah, who they actually think is the good guy. And so when all these Catholic priests and other religions and these Bible Belt Christians stand up and say to them, this Charlie Challenge game with the Ouija board is demonic. It's making our children worship demons and contact demons. There could be some truth to that. There could be some, it's well known that people who use the Ouija board for long periods of time, whatever reason, whether it be psychological or if indeed there are other entities, I don't know these things, but it is well known that many of them go into, actually probably all of them, if they stick it long term, end up crashing into pathological madness and viciousness, and huge numbers of them end up in psychiatric hospitals. That's been documented in quite a few books and journals. So it's been known for years that whatever it is about the Ouija board, it creates insanity, madness, viciousness and pathology. And ultimately, when the Catholic Church warns kids especially, about not using the Ouija board to do this Charlie Challenge game, you know what's going to happen, young kids. You, me, we were all the same when we were teenagers. You're going to go out and do it. Precisely why they made smoking, a no-no among teenagers, because they knew, if you read my book, The Animal of the Psyche, reverse psychology and forbidden fruit plays an enormous aspect in this stuff. But one of the ways we can defeat it is to return back to the archetypes of our kin, of our ancestors. Now, this doesn't only apply to people living in Europe. This also applies to people living in North America. Remember, even the Native Americans, you have very similar kinds of ideas too. But those of you of European, African, or other heritage, dig back far enough, and you will find out that you had these similar kinds of archetypes too. The Persians almost certainly did prior to the arrival of Islam, and it's important that we go back to these, because these were rooted in the same place that the symbols were rooted. They come from a time before words and probably even before we could speak, and therefore they're very deeply embedded within us. Now, there's something happening at the moment within the zeitgeist. Not the zeitgeist of movie, I'm talking about the actual, the cultural paradigm. And we are trying to literally connect back. It's been going on for a while. Now, if you were to talk to the average sort of like atheist, and you were to mention to him, like, what do you think of a culture like Iceland? And they say, oh, very modern, very sophisticated, very, this, that, and the other people and that. But Icelandic people have a very strong belief in the fairy folk. It doesn't matter if they're educated. It doesn't matter if they're, country folk or city folk. And you'll find this all across Scandinavia. And you used to find it all across Ireland until people were laughed at for believing in this. But the highly advanced, what we think are the highly advanced progressive states of Northern Europe, ironically, who are also, when they have surveys rated among the most happiest, have a strong connection with the fairy folk. And then you'll say, oh, that's nonsense, prove it. Why do you think all these English people were putting gnomes in their gardens? What do you think the gnomes were? If it's suppressed at the surface, it will manifest itself at the subconscious. So you have a situation in Iceland, which are a unique, group of people. Almost certain, most of them are either Norwegians. Well, there actually are a hybrid of Norwegians, Scots, and Irish. And the Scots and Irish are exactly the same race, no matter what the British Israelites tell you, that we're the same. The Scots and the Irish are the same race. Culturally, there are differences within that. For instance, like Ulster and the west of Scotland share a similar culture. And that's why they have languages like Ulster Scots, which does exist. I know people make a lot of fun of it, but it's been very badly marketed. But there was actually a language called Ulster Scots that did exist, and unfortunately, it's become kind of like politicized, like everything to do with Ulster. But there was a common culture. See, like I live in County Sligo. The next county up is Donegal. Donegal's in Ulster. Sligo's in Connacht. And so it was this is the borderline between the two ancient kingdoms. So you had Cuchulainn, who would leading the Ulster tribes, was going to war against the Connacht tribes, and that's why the Unionists and Loyalists in the north embraced the idea of Cuchulainn and the Tyne and all those legends. and they see themselves as defending their land against the Irish coming up from the south. And these, again, they get politicised again, and they get religiousised through things like British Israelites. But the archetypes remain. So it doesn't matter. The Irish and the Scots have different cultural, shall we say, crossovers in there. We're the same race ultimately. No, the Picts and the Southern Irish are ultimately the same race. And that's why they both fit so well with the Norse people and the Vikings, the same the north of England. Now, I'm going off on a tangent here, but as I says, the archetypes always come back. Now, and I spoke with the garden gnomes just then, and what they really mean is a longing. People were putting gnomes in their garden. They didn't know why. They thought they were funny. They were trying to bring back the fairies. That's what they were trying to do. Fairy folk magic. And you say there's no such things as fairies. It doesn't matter if they actually physically exist or not. The idea, and I can tell you, there are people in Ireland who have told me for a fact they not only exist, but they've seen them. And a few people around the world have told me they have seen them. Now, I haven't had any experiences like that. And sadly, in my life, I've been very devoid of these kinds of paranormal experiences for the most, compared to many other people. But they'll tell you they've seen these beings. And they fear them. Now, they don't fear them in a way that they're coming to attack us. They fear them in a way that we do not encroach upon their domain. It's almost like a mutual cooperation that we will not affect them and they will not affect us. Sometimes things happen. This is why people put gnomes in the garden. You had these manicured English lawns in the south of England, people putting in little red statues of gnomes. They were trying to recapture the magic of the forest and the grove. And that started in the Victorian era, turn of the century. It spread all over to English-speaking and many other parts of the world. It's now reached a second level at a very important pivotal point. Lots of reports are coming in now from Birmingham in England, around Berkshire, Derbyshire, Buncana in Donegal in Northern Ireland, Minneapolis in the USA, and Ann Arbor in Michigan in the USA, of forests suddenly having dozens, if not hundreds, of little fairy doors put at the base of old trees in old woodlands. In fact, in Somerset in England, the proliferation of these fairy doors mounted on these trees had become so common that the local council in Somerset literally had to get anti-fairy. I know it sounds like a joke, but they weren't trying to stop people from putting the doors up. They said there were people putting up doors that were not appropriate. They wanted doors up that had a nice folky art feel about them. And why are people all over the world? Well, it's very important where these are located, right? We have in Birmingham and Berkshire and Derbyshire is the land of the Danelaws. That was where the Danelaws took place in England. Don't quote me on Berkshire. I'll need to get more confirmation of that. But at least Birmingham and Derbyshire were in the Danelaws. These were the parts of England controlled by the kings of the Danish Vikings. Buncana in Donegal in Northern Ireland. Well, Donegal goes back to ancient times. We'll be talking about that in a second. But interesting, Minneapolis in Minnesota and Ann Arbor in Michigan was where many of the Scandinavians emigrated to the United States, and they're doing it there as well. Now, why are people having a compulsion to fit fairy doors at the end of trees? It's a follow-on from when they put gnomes in the garden. What's behind those doors? Well, nothing. We open up the doors. Sometimes kids or sometimes people go and put like little furniture, it's kind of cute, behind the fairy doors in order to make a little fairy home. But why are people building these fairy doors? I'll tell you why. They're trying to bring back the fairies, or bring back the snakes, as what they were retermed by St. Patrick and that emissary of Rome. They're trying to bring back the fairies, the fairy fate. They may not physically know it, they may not psychologically be aware of it, but subconsciously they're being driven to do it. Now, let's assume there are no fairies. It's still, there's no beings called fairies or that fit those models. It's still profoundly significant because what we're getting is what we are getting installed at the base of these trees are doors of perception to the subconscious of our European indigenous roots and heritage. We're reaching into them as transhumanism approaches, as the destruction of the human soul is now pondered as a serious thing by people who have no clue what it's like to be a human being. When you hear these transhumanists talk about what being human is, you listen to it, you read it, and you say, my God, that's not my experience of being a human being at all. The rest of us who are sane and not unsane and don't desire to be are having a subconscious reaction. Each and every action has an opposite reaction, and our reaction is to go deeper into the archetypes. And this is why people are making in their garden sheds, in their workshops, little cute fairy doors and nailing them or screwing them to the bottom of ancient trees. In fact, I would encourage all of you to do that. That's a project I want to encourage you to all to do. If you have young kids, not even young kids, even if you're 60 years old and don't have any kids, do this. Go find the oldest tree near where you live in a wild area. Make a fairy door. Make a little fairy door, and then screw it to the tree in the middle of nowhere. Just do it. I think it's very, very important. I think you'll actually be involved in a very powerful ritual, because you're returning to the base of the tree, the roots of the tree, where the roots of the ancient trees. The older a tree gets, the more there's a protrusion of the roots above the surface. And in fact, in the Lord of the Rings, I know I keep going back to Tolkien, but it's important because that man, J.R.R. Tolkien, he spent a lot of time studying European folklore, and he was far more subconsciously tapped into the likes of what Carl Jung was around the same time was talking about than he realised, just like James Joyce was. And there was this, the scene, the Ents, the trees, that the shepherds of the forest, and the part in the two towers where the trees are coming back to life, and they tried to feed on the hobbits. It's the same kind of thing. It's like if you do not take care of the ancient roots, they will come back to consume you. So this is why they have Europeans obsessed with the Amazon. Ooh, the Amazon! I'm really, really worried about the Amazon. Same with the jungle juice thing, right? Did they ever have you worried about the great forests of Europe or America? No. Well, maybe in America they do, because of the Native Americans have been very good at promoting that stuff. But in Europe, no. Ireland was once a country covered in trees. So was Britain. All gone now. Instead of worrying about the Amazon, saying they're cutting it all down, which I agree is a tragedy and all that, and it's terrible for the people that live there. But again, like worrying about things in the Middle East or earthquakes in Nepal, there's nothing you can do about it. But what you can do is to collect acorns and plant oak trees. You can go, if you see, like I saw a commercial forest was being knocked down here about 5 years ago. And as I went in there, the big machines are pulling up the Norwegian spruces and the Douglas firs, which had only been 30 years old. They were planted for commercial reasons. But in amongst them, there were all holly saplings, of holly trees. And I went in there and I dug up all the holly trees, the holly being a sacred plant. Now, they're all saplings, the ones I could dig up, and I put them in buckets and I replanted them in the woods behind my house, where I know they'll always be safe because that land will never be developed because it's basically a big bog. And it just can't be built on and just with the nature of where I live too. And that's important to do these things. Yes, okay, we have empathy for what happens in the Amazon, but we can only be proactive in our own communities. You know what I'm saying? So, do it locally. You sit there and you look at pictures of the Amazon being cleared. It's upsetting. Instead of worrying about that so much, go and rebuild the forest and the groves. And the start of that is things as simple as putting down fairy trees. Now, the same as in Ireland with the wells. This is why another thing is happening in Ireland. The one thing that got Irish people off their backsides finally was water. Ishka Baha, the water of life. And when Irish Water tried to own water in Ireland, that was the primal trigger. Because in Ireland we have holy wells everywhere. Holly wells, by the way. And nowadays they're associated with Christianity, just like the crossroads are often have statues of the Virgin Mary. Unfortunately, the holy wells go back to the time of the Druids. The water in them was pure, sacred, and healing. And that's why that triggered the Irish people to march in their tens of thousands against Irish Water. Again, the same reason why the people are putting these fairy doors on trees. It's coming back. The subconscious, like Carl Jung said, if you betray the truth of yourself, if you deny the reality of yourself, and this speaks on a cultural level, it will come exploding up from the subconscious and manifest itself in the conscious or the real world. And that's what's happening with all these fairy doors and all these trees all over the place. And we're going to see more things like this. I hope they have to do this show for another couple of years, and I'm sure during that period other things will make their mark as well. Now, at the previous show I spoke about the goddesses, quoting heavily from Jack Roberts' small book on Irish and Gaelic history, interspersed with my own editorialization. And people were confused. A few people said to me, I'm a bit confused about the history of Ireland. Was it Celtic? Was it Gaelic? Who was the Trua de Danann, which is often mispronounced as the Tuatha de Danann by Irish people? Shame on them. It's the Trua de Danann. Now, there was people think that the Celts were the first people on Ireland and in Britain. No, they weren't. There was previous races. Now, according to the Irish Annals, which could be right and could be wrong, but will probably have a fair bit of truth in it, the first race to have arrived in Ireland, according to the Annals, was the Cesari Brannan Balba, and they arrived in Ireland in 2956 BC, according to the Irish Annals now. The first goddesses of Ireland is thought to be the Bamba. I spoke on the Bamba on the last show. And the oldest name for Ireland is Bamba, the land of women. But the annals record a Cesare, as the first valiant woman who came to the Isle of Bamba. The Cesare is said to have been either the daughter of Noah, now you see that this is the British Israelites thing coming in again, or Greek, and is said to have landed with 3 men and 50 women near Bantry or in Wexford in the south of Ireland. They set up the first colony at the meeting of the 3 rivers, the Cumar, the 3 Uisce, the Sur, the Nor and the Barrow. That's in the southeast of Ireland, in the counties Wexford, Waterford, Carlow area. Actually particularly County Carlow, you don't hear much about County Carlow outside Ireland. You don't even hear much about Carlow inside Ireland. But there is a powerful energy there anytime I've ever been there, and you feel the ancestors there. Now, the Noah part, or the Greek part, was probably a later extrapolation by Christians to make it sound like Ireland has a connection with the Bible. The British, this is what the ultimate roots of British Israelite stuff is. These annals were written by Christian monks. So you have to take it with a pinch of salt. But however, in terms of names, we can definitely validate these, because the names associated with these races and entities, their names still exist in Ireland to this day. So there's truth to it. It's not just something that monks in the 12th and the 13th century invented. Then after them, in 2678 BC, was arrival of the Partholonians. Partholonians, it's a hard word to pronounce. The Partholons is said to have arrived in Ireland 270 years after the deluge. You see, again, the monks, this is written by Christian monks, you don't take that part into it. And to have come from Greece with his wife Delgna, his 3 sons and 1,000 followers. They landed at Asaro, or Es Ruad near Ballyshannon. That's very close to here. That's Ballyshannon in County Donegal. Then in 2300 BC, the age of the Fomorians. They were said to be a race, now this is a good one, and this is an important one too. They were said to be a race of sea robbers and to have come from pirates, and have come from Scandinavia. Their god was Balor of the Evil Eye, and their main stronghold was Tory Island. They were finally defeated by the Tuatha De Danann at Moytura. Now, this is interesting because the Fomorians were believed to have come from Scandinavia, and this is probably true because there's a lot to suggest that prior to the great Nordic Viking establishment of the sea route into Ireland, they had a very strong knowledge of the sea route down into Ireland. It was probably a historical memory or sent down through, spoken word through the ages of the Fomorians, their ancestors, who came to Ireland from Scandinavia. Again, there are places associated with the Fomorians that we can actually put the finger on, named, so it's quite like the Bamba. The Fomorians are almost certainly a real race and a real age that came to Ireland. Then in 1896 BC, the age of the Tuatha De Danann. You hear about these the most of all. These are kind of like the mystical Irish elf race. Not elves in the sort of like European sense, but again, a race that were semi-divine, like the elves in the Lord of the Rings. They were mystical and semi-divine. The Tuatha De Danann, or the people of the goddess Danu. You see, this is a common thread with Ireland. It's either established by people who worship goddesses over gods, or is highly attractive to people who place gods at the highest level of their pantheon of gods, such as the Vikings. Now again, it's said that they've originated from Greece and to have arrived in dark clouds by magic. Fascinating stuff. Loads of ways to decipher that. We're not going to go down the UFO route because I think that's all nonsense and a psyop. They fought first with the Firbolgs and then the Fomorians, but were finally overthrown by the Milesians, which is what the Gaelic Irish are today. After this, they dwelt beneath the earth as the people of the sea. Now the fairies, right? The fairy people who dwell in the other world. They're building the doors at the bases of trees. Folks, you listening to me? Which can be entered through the mounds and the cairns. Now you see, even up until relatively recent times, I'm talking about 500 years ago, Irish people still built souterrains, which is like tunnels under the ground. And they just went in there. And no one can really, there are hundreds of them, thousands of them, just around here. And nobody really knew it. They were communicating with their ancestors. They were going in. And the whole belief is that the Tuatha De Danann will come to save Ireland at its time of greatest need. In 1700 BC is the age of the Nemedians. The people of Namid are said to have come from Scythia in northern Turkey. So these are probably a Celtic, in the European sense, a Celtic people. And to have travelled to Ireland in a migration pattern that is similar to the later Celts. The Nemedians fought 3 battles against the Fomorians, and it is from one of their chiefs, Bretan Mail, is said that the island of Britain owes its name. So this is your history too, people in Britain, Scotland, Wales, England. This is your history too I'm talking about. Because these people, a lot of them had to pass through your land to get to ours. Now in 1525 BC, a fascinating group called the Firbolgs. Named after the goddess Bolga, they are, along with the De Danann, regarded as a mystical people and the people of the peaks. So they'd be very close to what the European idea of the dwarves living inside mountains. And it is their 5 chiefs who divide the land into the original 5 provinces, which are Ulster, the Kingdom of Ulster, the Kingdom of Munster, the Kingdom of Leinster, the Kingdom of Connacht, and the Kingdom of Meath or Tara or Royal Meath, which is now divided between Ulster and you see the most sacred province was chopped in half and doesn't exist anymore, which is now divided between Ulster and parts of Leinster. After being defeated by the Daedanans through Daedanan, they were said to have inhabited the Arran and Rathlin Islands. 3 of the great sacred centres were called after the Firbolgs, goddess Titulia, Carmen, and the Tia, or Tara. Tara is what was named after their goddesses. Again, the goddess idea. Now, they went to live on the islands of Arran and Rathlin Island, and this is very common in many mythologies, even in like the reconstructed mythologies of Tolkien. You have the undying lands where the elves went to when the age of the elves ended. Finally, in 1498 BC, the age of the Milesian Gaels. These are the sons of Miel and are said to have landed at Kenmare, that's in the southwest of Ireland, and have been urged to travel to Ireland by a prophetic vision. Early Greek historians recorded a race also called the Milesians who came from Crete. This is the first one that we can actually pin down that maybe there is something between the Middle East. Well, Crete isn't the Middle East; it's the Mediterranean. Say Southern Europe, southeastern Europe, and Ireland, because of the etymologies. They finally overthrew the Daedanan at Tara and renamed Ireland after their main goddess, Scotia, which is where Scotland gets its name from. But the Daedanan chief bard, Amergin, made them promise the land would remain in the name of the goddess Era forever. So, and then after that came the Celts. So they were the pre-Celtic races of Ireland, but I don't even believe the Celts came to Ireland. I think that the Milesian Gaels, they were what they call the European Celts, and I agree with Tessarian and other sort of in this sense that there's too much evidence to suggest that it was a west-east migration rather than an east-west migration, and you can even see that here alone in Ireland. Because the most with the exception of Tara, now Tara predates the Milesians, remember, on the east coast of Ireland, and Newgrange and the monuments of the Boyne Valley, the vast majority of the most amazing structures are on the west coast of Ireland, and they get less and less more, shall we say, impressive as you come towards the east of Ireland. So I'm convinced that there is a lot to the west-east migration, and I don't believe there was a group called the Celts. I actually believe that they were the Milesian Gaels that went to Europe with their culture, just like in later Christian times Irish monks went to Europe with early Christianity, and were very successful. We Irish are great at bringing people over to our side. Just we got that gift of the gab. Maybe that's something left over from our magical Firbolgs or Tuatha Danann past. But it's no doubt about it, the Irish people do have this gift of communication. It's something we are blessed with, a lot of us. And so you would have had these Milesian Gaels after, say, 1300 BC, going to Europe and spreading their art and culture, like the knotted artwork and all the gods like Cernunnos, the god of the Celtic deer god, the hunt god, and all these other ideas all over Europe. See, we're good at that. We're good at it. Just look, just imagine that. It's sort of like a colonialization of the bardic idea. And people would, just like today when people hear ideas relating to new spiritual movements, they say, oh, I find that really interesting, I find that really attractive. And then you have like New Age kind of things born. Well, it stands to reason that it would have happened back then too. So you'd have these fellas, these gobshites like me, who come into a town in France or in Hungary or anywhere, Austria, and like me, I think I'm pretty good at talking to people. I can tell a good joke. I'm pretty sociable in the social setting, and I enjoy the company of people. And fellas like me back then and women like me back then would have been like all over them saying, "Oh, this is down the other, and we have all this culture, and this is our knotted artwork." And the local artist would have said, "Wow, that interlaced Gaelic or Milesian or whatever artwork that you Irish fellas have brought over here is beautiful. I'm going to copy it. I would like to put that into our local jewellery. And that's how I think it happened. I think it was a cultural assimilation from west to east. But again, can I prove it? No, I can't. But I can only go by, you know, the evidence presented in front of me. But I can tell you one thing for a fact. There's a lot more evidence for that than all these biblical tribes that have made their way from the Holy Land, as they call it, to all different parts of Europe. There's absolutely no evidence for that. And yet that forms the basis of this idea of the European migrations. And if you look at these European east-west migrations, it just makes no sense. You have the Goths, say for instance, right? The Goths, right? The Visigoths. Now, they are supposed to have, they were a Germanic tribe, and after a while they ended up in France and Spain. Yes, they did. But they didn't, they also went north, and that's conveniently ignored. They went north into Gothland. Where do you think Gothenburg in Sweden gets its name from? So this is the land of, these are the people of Beowulf, the Grecians. The Gracias, however you want to pronounce it, whatever vernacular you pronounce it, the Goths. And so they're not only in northern Portugal and Spain, but they're also in southern Sweden. But that doesn't fit in with the biblical migration idea. So it's ignored. Just like the Vikings completely threw a spanner in that works, when you have, you know, to this day, communities in northern Portugal which still celebrate their Viking ancestry and put runes in their textiles designs. So a lot of the so-called archaeological ideas of what European migrations happened from east to west, even among academic mainstream atheistic historians and archaeologists, is still based on this biblical idea. Just like the Big Bang is based on Genesis. Jesuits, my friends, Jesuits. Now, I want to talk about the again, quoting heavily from Jack Roberts' guidebook on the pace, from the Royal County, as they call it, not royal as in Royal British, but royal as in Royal Mead, the land of Tara, between Dublin and Belfast, inland, around Slane, Tara, the Boyne Valley, the Blackwater rivers, the Boyne rivers, and all that area. And that was also very close to the areas around Athboy, where you had like the Tyne, the stories about Cuchulainn. This is a part of Ireland that's absolutely saturated in mythology. This is a living Middle Earth, really, when you start looking at it. This is again why I get so excited about it. I get so passionate about it. That you don't have to read fantasy novels to make believe that such places like Middle Earth and Rivendell and all these other places existed in a fantasy world. They are here in the real world with us. They are left here, they're standing to this day. The great sacred centres that were pivotal to the ceremonial structure of the ancient Ireland are found in the area which became known as the County of Meath today, or the Royal County. Tara, the ancient ceremonial capital of Ireland, and the important Arnach assembly sites of Tatulya and Talach are situated in the heart of the county and are most highly revered sacred centres of the mysterious Boyne culture. The great and legendary Brúna Boyne and the ancient Slieve na Calach mountains. Meath has its own specific localised goddesses, such as Tia or Tara or Tatuya, but there are also specific places within the landscape where all the major provincial goddesses are also represented. The great dominating goddess is the Bull, which I spoke about the last episode, the cow, the female goddess cow archetype, who is divinized in the three sacred rivers of the Boyne, the Blackwater, and the Bugara, which is now the Timblestown River, or the Bow, which is the original name. See, they give it a silly name when the English were here, but they give it a Timblestown. It's a stupid name for a river that has so much incredible mythological significance. These, and I'm not putting down the English, I'm not the British Empire, not the English people. These rivers interconnected all the ancient sacred centres of the royal county, and they flowed through the greatest centre of them all, the Brú na Boyne, and that's the Boyne Valley. The great megalithic, where Newgrange is, the great megalithic complex of Brua on the sacred river of the goddess Boyne, or the Boand, was constructed by the people known today as the Boyne culture, or a people known in mythology as the Cid, very close in etymology to the Cids of the Nordic pantheon, the witch people. This, the most sacred of places, is central to the whole mythology, where it is referred to as the burial place or the abode of the greatest gods and goddesses. It is not certain how ancient the sacred centres may be. The most active building phase is thought to have been around, now this is the active building phase, not the initial building phase, 4,500 to 6,000 years ago. That's when the most active phase was happening, not the beginning. 6,000 years ago. Whilst more recent archaeological research has found evidence of even earlier activity on the site. Just think about that. Just think about that. The Boyne Valley is most well known for its massive megalithic chambered cairns. These are extremely complex mounds with long entrances or passages leading to chambers, and which is often cruciform in shape with antechambers. That's chambers going off to the side. Many of the inner chambers contain large and often elaborately carved stone basins which represent the most sacred of symbolism, lying at the very core of the sacred Brua. Tradition remembers these sacral basins as the Dagda's magic cauldrons, from which flows an endless stream of wonders, a symbolism that is enhanced by the astronomical orientation of the cairns. Astronomy is a fundamental aspect of the whole symbolism inherent in the monuments, wherein a beam of sunlight enters the inner sanctum of the sacred mound, imbibing it with the very substance of supreme deity, the goddess, whose main element is light and fire. Now this is the opposite of what happened to the Greeks. You see, these ancient people who built this in the Boyne Valley, they constructed the monuments on earth to not project themselves into the heavens, but to bring the heaven down here onto earth. The Greeks did the same, did the opposite. What happened was, a Greek culture went into decline when they took the gods from their local areas, from the trees and the woods, Mount Olympus, all around them in Greece, and put them in the heavens as constellations. Then Greek society went into decline because they had lost their magical connection with the world around them. It's the drawing down of this is what they do in witchcraft, the drawing down of the moon. In the Hindu tradition, the capturing of the full moon in the water on the night of an engagement of a bride. The idea is to bring these things to earth, not to throw our power away to them in space. All the primary goddesses and gods dwell here in the legendary abode of the Lords of Light, but it is primarily the Boand and the ancient great mother of all, the goddess of the heavens, from which they all emanate. Newgrange, the central mound of the whole complex, is known as the Brumach Unach, or the seed of Angus, or Angus Og. Angus Og. Angus is the son of the Dagda of his infidelity. Og is Irish for son. So if you have someone called Og after their name, it's usually the son of somebody. It's like saying Junior in Irish. Of the Dagda Union, with its primary goddess, the Boand, Doubt, which is another major centre of megaliths and megalithic cave art, is the house of darkness. You see, you have the contrast here. And the seed of the Druid Basil is said to have built it in a single day. Brazail. Its main association, however, is with the mysterious Bodan, of whom little is known except that he or she is the shepherd of the Elkmar and is closely connected to the Boand. I'm turning the page here with sticky fingers. No, they're not sticky for that reason. I was eating a jam donut. The most remarkable of the triple mounds is note. that's nearby, Dave. You go to Google Earth, it's great. You can explore all these on Google Earth, which is one of the good things about modern technology. The most remarkable of the triple mounds, and triple, I'll talk this at the end of the show, the importance of the triple, the triskel, okay? Of the triple mounds is the note, the jewel of the megalithic world, which is remembered in mythology as the great Bua of the Connacht, the seed of the goddess Boand, and to whom the whole sacred valley is dedicated. This is the largest mound in the sacred valley, and in later development on a site where a number of smaller mounds had already been erected. It has 2 passages and chambers and the greatest profusion of megalithic art in all of Western Europe. The greatest profusion of megalithic art, if the east-west migration idea is true, should be in places like Turkey, Romania, Bulgaria. They should not be in Ireland. Instead, it's the other way round, proving, I believe, my theory and others' theories, that the Milesians, Gaels, were in west-east migration. Over half of its 134 cave stones have been carved, and many decorated stones are found inside the passages, whilst the smaller satellite mounds are also many carved stones. The Brúin Aboyne translates as the fairy house of the river of the white cow goddess, and is also called the Bearlac Bron Freen, the pass of the white cow goddess. The last name symbolised the sacred river, the Boyne, as a reflection of the cycle of the stars, you see, bringing down from heaven again, or of the Milky Way, passing through the heavens just as the Boyne winds of the royal county of Meath, and passes by the ancient homes of the seed as it flows through the sacred valley. Several tracts from the Middle Ages record that the monuments of the Boyne Valley, and while each of these refers to a wide range of notable personages, they nonetheless reflect an abiding tradition of deepest respect for the ancient Brug. The Din Den Sankus recorded some of the principal ones as the monument of the Dagda, the mound of the Morrigan, and the monument of the Mata, the good god, the goddess, and the armour-plated monster that are carved out as sacred places in the land. Now we're going to talk about, before the show ends, I got 7 minutes, I can give you a quick primer on Tara. You've all heard the name Tara. In both history and mythology, Tara has represented the primary ceremonial centres of Ireland, the coronation centre of the Ardrí, or the High King of Ireland. It is recorded here that the kings of Ireland ceremonially married the goddess Tia or Tepi, after whom Tara is named. Yet the tributary goddess of the Temyar is Maeve or Maeve, and all of the principal goddesses of Ireland each have a particular place dedicated to them within the precincts of the sacred centre. In the annals of the Middle Ages, it features in the equivalent capacity to a civic centre or capital city, with literary sources referring to the great many buildings standing on the ancient hills. You see, this is the reason why people are obsessed, and rightly so, with places like the Boyne, with the Giza Plateau in Egypt, because the Egyptians, because of where they lived, had to build their great monuments from stone. So they stood and they've lasted the test of time. Where the Nordic people, they built their, up around, inside the Scandinavians, who built their temples in Sweden, they would have to have built them in large amounts of wood, just like the Irish would have. They would have used timber, readily available, a renewable resource, and would have built magnificent structures. In fact, all over Ireland, even in Knocknashee, the Hill of the Fairies, which I can see from the window right here, there's large remains of large foundations. There's no stones or anything. They used wood. So wood doesn't last. And that's why when you go to Tara, people are expecting to see, where are the gigantic monuments? Where are the gigantic buildings of the kings and the goddesses? They don't exist because they're built of wood. And the Christians burnt them down. But they still remain in a psychic sense. The former possessions of the goddess Tia and the prehistoric pantheon is only vaguely remembered, but she is the daughter of the sun god Lu, and in the later Celtic Christian themes, she has been perverted into one of St. Bridget's nuns, Rath Grania. A large complex of earthworks just north of the central complex is named after the great sun goddess Grania. Directly south of Tara is a huge ceremonial enclosure, over 200 metres in diameter. It's massive, called the Rath Maid, or after the goddess Maeve. You see, it's goddesses, 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 goddesses. Tara is composed of a great concentration of sacred and not in a New Age kind of way. I worship the goddess. I worship the goddess. No, it's not like that. These were seen as fair dues. Fair dues. It was like, we have gods and we have goddesses. It wasn't that they had the goddesses were better or the gods were better. It was just like, on earth there's men and women, male and female. It's like saying it's the same in the spiritual world. That was completely destroyed by Abrahamic monotheism. Tara is composed of a great concentration of sacred ceremonial enclosures, rats, earthworks, and many unified banks or causeways, various ancient stones, and several mounds and barrows. Central to the whole complex is the most ancient structure of all, a chambered cairn in the Boyne Valley, generally known as the Mound of the Hostages, which predates most of the other visible structures. This is one of the most important chambered cairns outside the Boyne Valley complex, for from within this mound was retrieved the greatest quantity of grave goods and offerings found in any monument of this age in Ireland. The excavators described finding over a foot in depth of cremated remains. The chamber was sealed up in antiquity, though it was obviously left open for considerable periods beforehand, and later burials were found just outside the entrance or in the edge of the mound. In astronomical orientation is towards the sunrise at Imbolc or An Samhain, that's a Halloween, and the fire festival, which is especially dedicated, is to the great snow-white goddess Bridget and Maeve. The Mound of the Hostages stands within. You got to visit Tara. The Mounds of the Hostages stands within the greatest enclosure of the hill, and the royal enclosure, a great oval-shaped area enclosed within a bank of a ditch of nearly 300 metres, even bigger again. At its present form, there is not a particularly impressive earthworks, but the banks were originally much higher, and the ditch was carved deeply into the bedrock, more than 3 metres below the modern level. So it was huge, this site. And then you add to that all the massive wooden buildings that were there that no longer exist. Before the Royal Rat was built, however, there was another enclosure of unknown dimensions, but which has been traced to the mound of the hostages from a good distance. This may have been the oldest earthworks that existed on the hill, because it was stated by the excavators that the mound on this ditch was already silted up when the mound above it was built in the Neolithic period. We are talking about this stuff was built probably 10,000 years ago, when they tell us that civilization history didn't exist. Within the royal enclosure of the Chac Cormac, the House of Cormac, and the Forad, the royal seat, are the standing stones so close together that the outer banks are joined. The Liafal, the stone of destiny by which the High Kings of Ireland were consecrated, now stands on a flat platform at the centre of the Chac Cormac, and is said to originally stood close to the mounds of hostages. The reason why it did was because in the 18th century, British Israelites, these mental cases, obsessed with finding the Ark of the Covenant, dug up Tara and caused enormous vandalism and damaged many things. They were just a continuum of what had been going on since St. Patrick. Before I close the show, what is the symbol of Ireland that many people around the world think of? St. Patrick and his shamrock. The shamrock is made of 3 leaves and a stem coming out of it. It is a perversion of the Triskel, the 3 waters of the Boyne Valley. The three interlocking circles that you associate with Gaelic culture, and even reflects itself in the coat of arms of the Isle of Man to this day. The stem being held by Patrick is the rein, 1 ring to bring them in, 1 ring to bind them under Roman law. My name is Thomas Sheridan. This is The Velocity of Now. I hope you like the show. We'll be doing more of this in future, and feck 'em if they can't take a joke. Good night.